We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to This Song Is Yours, the podcast where we explore the art of songwriting, celebrate incredible artists and dive deep into the stories behind their music. I'm your host, Simon Fink, and as always, thank you for joining us. For a week in May, we were lucky enough to take the podcast to Los Angeles to record a special series of episodes with some truly incredible artists. And today's episode is another one of those. Our guest today on the podcast is alternative pop songwriter Linying. Originally from Singapore, but now based in LA, Linying makes dreamy and atmospheric pop that wouldn't feel out of place alongside artists like St. Vincent, Mitski, or Men I Trust. In April of this year, she released her stunning sophomore record, Swim Swim. Inspired by her time on the remote island of Siargao, the album sees Linying reflecting on the many forms of love, affection, self-discovery, and femininity. It's a fluid and beautiful listen, and one that we highly recommend spending time with. While we were in LA, we had the opportunity to sit down with Linying and talk about this brand new chapter. We discuss how writing in such an isolated and serene location gave her the space to reevaluate the nature of songwriting. We chat about her experience co-producing the record and the lessons that she's continuing to learn throughout that process. We also hear about her hopes for bringing Swim Swim to life in a live capacity. Now, we want to say a massive thank you to Christina for her help with today's episode and remind everyone that the brand new Linying album, Swim Swim, is out right now. You'll find links in the show notes where you can listen to the album and follow her across all of her social channels. While you're there, make sure you follow us as well across all of our social media channels and subscribe to this podcast. Doing so means that you won't miss out on future episodes and guests. Now let's get into it. Here is our conversation with Linying.
Substitute for be goods, just a list of long shirts you were trying to follow through. You know we're here for.
Please welcome to This Song Is Yours, Linying. Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's going. I'm having a good morning. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much for coming to join us today on the podcast. I don't know if I'm allowed to share this, and if not, I will gladly edit it out once this airs. You were saying just before we started recording that you started this morning off with some badminton.
I did.
Tell us how did you get into that? I kind of love that that's a really nice way to start the day, but I want to hear it from yourself.
I'm thinking a lot about it, and on the way here, I've been asking myself what drives me to do the things I do. I mean, I'm blessed to have the space and the time to follow my intuition wherever it goes, and it's taken me great places. And badminton is just one of those things that I've somehow incorporated into my weekly routine. I go 3 times a week to a particularly immigrant part of town in LA. It's close to Alhambra, where essentially everything feels like everything is in Chinese. It feels like a whole other country. And the mood in the badminton gym it's as if I'm the youngest person there. Everyone's bewildered as to what this young looking girl is doing at 8 a.m. playing with all these other old people who are retired. And I don't know, to me, I'm still working it out, but I think part of it is I really love the anonymity and just being no one other than a girl being bossed around by old people. So yeah, I get lots of life lessons and a good workout, and it's great.
I was going to say, in my mind, it was like I imagine that there must be a lot of wisdom coming from some of the older patrons and badminton players.
Yes, and they take everything with such levity and a good attitude. And, I think people have gone through things and it makes you realize nothing is truly that deep, which is something difficult for me to remember because my instinct is to always throw myself headfirst into everything. And when I feel something, I feel it very deeply and it becomes my whole reality, it becomes my whole world, and sometimes it's nice to be taken out of that and to be around people who've seen a lot more than I have.
I absolutely love that. I think that's such an incredible kind of way to to start the week, and also, as you said, to have that moment of, I guess, disconnecting from the reality of your own life and just being able to kind of focus on the task that is just not connected to anything. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you feel it being in LA, but this city in particular, I only moved here 2 years ago, so I'm fairly fresh, all things considered, and I think what you do when you're a creative and you're in the world of creatives, it really defines you when you're in a city like LA. Most of my life I spent in Singapore, where, you know, having a career in the arts was something that wasn't part of the norm. So I was always an anomaly, and I was, you know, it felt normal to not be part of that. But over here, it really consumes you, and I think that's what makes it great, and, you know, why so many artists flock to this place. But at the same time, I've really had to clarify for myself, like, you know, am I more than just the things I make? Who am I outside of that? And sometimes I'm just someone who's learning a skill and, you know, being bossed around by someone old. That's all.
I think that while Australia is not on that kind of level yet, I can, even in some of the interactions we've had in Los Angeles this week, you can see little elements of that, in terms of that if you want to be creative, you can do so, and that is fantastic. Yeah. But it's that if you don't know when to have the ability to switch off, it's a city that also encourages you not to switch off. Exactly. And that can be both good and dangerous, I feel.
Yeah. I mean, do you like it here? Do you find it different?
I love it here.
Yeah.
But it's only been like a week. So I'm sure we were discussing before they're like any city, both good and bad. Yeah. I love it. There obviously is family, friends, my wife in Australia, so it would be difficult to, you know, make that move. But it is. Yeah, it's a very interesting city creatively as well. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah. You've very kindly joined us today, though, however, in this city to talk about your sophomore record. It is out right now. It's been out for, I think, a few weeks at this point when we're chatting. It's called Swim Swim. Firstly, congratulations on this record.
You.
It is a gorgeous, gorgeous record.
Thank you.
How are you feeling with it being out into the world, being received by people?
Well, sometimes I feel like I've built so much up to it, and this tends to be a pattern with me. I'll fixate on something. Everything will be done in service of that one thing. And then as we get closer, I suddenly detach and nothing means anything anymore. And I don't really know what it means or if it has to have any meaning. But today, I feel proud of it. I feel happy. And the thing I feel most proud of is the fact that I play it for leisure. Sometimes I'm just driving in the car and I just really want to hear the song. And it's not to hear what, you know, it's not a critical listen. I'm not listening out for flaws. I'm really listening back to re-experience a time in my life that I know I'm never going to be able to live through again. And of course, every moment is unique to the other, but you know, that particular time in my life that I feel like I've fossilized with Swim Swim is it's an especially colorful, eventful, rich one. And I'm so grateful that I've had collaborators and, you know, friends to join me in making this record, and that this just exists. You know, this is just a slice of a person who has lived a life.
100%. I also imagine that there must be, and we've spoken to some other songwriters about it, there must be a sense of pride, like when you listen to it as well. There has to be like I did this, I made this record.
Yeah. And I think, what I'm proud of is, and I struggle with this a lot because I've grown up in a pretty rigorous academic system, and I'm so used to wanting to achieve things just for the sake of excelling. You know, even though I don't, I might not even want the prize at the end of it. I just want to know I can get it, you know? We just get a kick out of these things. And I've had to really mindfully, intentionally divorce that from the music making process, because I don't think I'm an excellent musician, and I also think the work that it takes to get there is something I'm not cut out for. I don't think I have that kind of grit, you know? There are certain musicians I meet, especially in LA, you're always meeting people who are, you know, so into their music, and they really approach their music in a way that's like, you know, I want to make it perfect. But for me, my perfection is in the accuracy of communicating the truth of what's inside. And that's a really tall order, because, what's in our conscious mind and what's not. It's a long winding path, and it takes a lot to tease out, to all these little threads to weave into a coherent story. And to me that's where I feel proud of this record. I know it's not a record that's gonna change culture or push boundaries in that way, but I think it's very, very accurate. I could not have expressed the reality of and the fidelity of all these feelings and experiences in a way better than this, and that's what I'm most proud of.
I kind of love that, though. I think that's really cool. I was hoping that you might be able to talk to us, and I do have notes, and I want to make sure that I'm pronouncing this correctly, hence why I'm going to refer to my notes.
All right.
Because I know that for this record, there was a certain place that I feel maybe helped inspire it, or at least was a really good conduit for being creative in writing. It was Siargao.
That's right. Perfect pronunciation.
Which is an island in the Philippines.
That's right.
Where you spent some time, if I'm correct. I'm wondering, what was it particularly about Siargao that...
It was wild.
Yeah.
So that whole story with Siargao began when I got asked by a Filipino movie star to write songs for her, because she wanted to pivot to music. She had found massive success in the acting industry, and she was just having a good time on this island, and then I think she just wanted to make some music. And where I was based, this was right before I moved to LA, the industry is very different in Asia. So I found a lot of the work that I was doing outside of my own artist project was writing songs for influencers, essentially, which I find fun. Part of it's like half math and the other half is therapy. You gotta sit them down and be like, oh, so how was your week? And what happened with your boyfriend? And, and then you get into the session and you tease out everything they're feeling. You put it into a song, into something that they feel connected to, and it's pretty gratifying in that way. So that was something I was doing pretty regularly with a production partner of mine. His name is Josh. And so one day Josh called me and said, hey, I have this crazy gig. We have to write for a movie star. She's wildly famous in her country. I don't really know, but it's on like a nice island. He sent me a Google Maps pin. I was like, wow, this is in the middle of nowhere. But okay. So we did it. And, we had to bring our own microphones, our own stands. There were no studios. And I think coming from a very manicured society, Singapore is so modern, it's so clean, it's so functional and pragmatic, everything works. It was a huge shock for me to land in a place where it just felt lawless. Complete. Yeah, it was just empty. And you could really see the beginnings of things. Like if there was a house, you could see how the house got built, because you have to think about what makes a wall in a house. And I've never asked myself questions like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's a really like city rat, country mouse type of situation. But what I think I found so inspiring about that place is, first of all, the fact that I couldn't be or define anyone or myself, because there was nothing to anchor that definition, because I'm such a contrarian by personality. I always love thinking of myself in context of everyone else and being, okay, where am I similar, where am I different? But in a place like that, where you have no idea what anything is, barely anything actually exists, you have to really look inward and look into yourself and find out, who am I outside of all external influences? And it was also a place that was so untouched by modernity. It was so natural. I'd never been in a place that natural in my life, where, it made me reevaluate things about what dirty and clean mean. Because, I think innately as humans, we have like a connection to the earth, and I think that's something that I haven't been in touch with until quite recently. So I think in discovering the natural world around me, it really allowed me to discover my true nature, my innate nature. And that was an empowering thing. It was fun. Yeah.
I think that's incredible, though, that experience, which I imagine is a crazy experience in itself, just receiving a message like, hey, we're writing for a movie star.
Yeah.
But that experience of being able to disconnect and then reevaluate and re-question, I guess, reset your own ways that you perceive things.
Exactly.
Then also, I guess imagine would affect anyone's creative process in a certain way, but for this record, for Swim Swim, has affected your creative process
so much.
In terms of like rediscovering oneself and kind of, I think that there are certain themes across this record. I know that also there was, I guess, discussion of affection or love in certain capacities. I know that there was, I want to say femininity as well across this record. When you were going in to write and record the record, was there, I guess, a certain intention that you wanted to make sure that you did get across to people who were going to listen once those songs were out? Or was it that, actually, no, I'll leave the question at that,
Yeah, I didn't overthink it. I find that if I try to think too much about how something is received, I end up messing up the process for myself. But at the same time, I'm fully aware that nothing exists in a vacuum, and the whole reason why any of us do any of this is for it to be heard. You know, you want to find that connection with someone else that you otherwise might not ever have encountered in your life, and all art is your way of doing that. All art is a portal. And so I wouldn't say I actively thought of communicating something clearly, but I think I've always known from writing songs and from being a music listener and loving certain artists and the way they've communicated things, that when an artist leans into the specificity of their experience, the emotional truth of it becomes all the more universal, which is such a mysterious and fascinating thing to me, but I find that to be so true. So to me, my priority was to be alive to everything that was around me, be aware and present and just notice things. Yeah.
Do you remember your first attraction to songwriting and what kind of got you involved or invested in writing your own music?
Yeah, it's so funny because the episode that I just stopped at when I parked the car was the Bright Eyes episode. And I was a big Bright Eyes fan when I was in my schooling years. I listened to so much Bon Iver and Bright Eyes, and these two were artists whom I remember feeling, that's one way to be an artist. And I loved that because before that I never really understood how to alchemize writing into a way to express something that you were truly feeling. I would write little poems when I was like 8 or 9 and my hamsters died and I had grief about it. I would write these little Shel Silverstein type poems, but what I love about music and songwriting is that the music fills in the blanks that the words can't. And I love words. I am such a lover of words, but it is both, magical and empowering to see that even with language, there are so many gaps. And we have it's a great language, but there are so many gaps that just can't be filled, and only music can do it. And that's the magic for me.
It is a truly kind of unique thing, and I think what I really love, and maybe it's probably what drew me to starting and continuing the podcast, is that discussion of, as you just articulated then, it's a really magical thing that seems to fill that space. I'm stealing your words, I apologize, but still that fill that space, sorry, that words can't really use. And I think that for every artist, creative, even anyone who just enjoys music, even they then struggle to then articulate that feeling, which I think is another evidence of the magic that it holds and how it kind of works, which I think is just really fascinating. I think, it is. I love that it was also like Bright Eyes, as you mentioned. But I think that, he for us was a key influence and just a lover of words. Wondering whether you might walk me through, I guess, kind of talking about indie rock. I'd say Bright Eyes and Bon Iver, indie rock of the 2000s. One of my favourite tracks on Swim Swim was Pink Gel.
Oh.
Lovely song. I feel like the song is kind of talking about and you'll please correct me if I'm wrong on this, it's kind of about the affection or the uncertain affection towards someone and maybe expressing that, maybe not.
Perfectly.
And it also, am I picking up on a Sufjan Stevens little reference in there?
You are.
I thought might not be too hidden, so it might not be like too clever of me, but I was wondering, I love that track. Listening to the record, I kind of kept going back to Pink Gel and just replaying that, wondering whether you might be able to talk us through the creation of that song or where it came from.
That was the toughest one to write, I think. Pink Gel is about a familial relationship that I felt very uncertain about growing up, and when we talk about the magic of songwriting, to me, Pink Gel is the best representation of that, because there are things that are easy to romanticize and tell a good story out of, and to be honest, I live a lot of my life in that way. A lot of the decisions I make doesn't make a good story. Is it do I want to be on my deathbed and be like, you know what, I did this, and that happened. Like, that's a lot of the calculation that goes inside my head, and it's led to great experiences. But there are also plenty of things that we don't really have that kind of control over. You can control the way you narrate it, but the way you experience it is often, it's often out of your hands. And having a tough relationship growing up, that's something that no one willingly chooses, but that many of us go through. And Pink Gel was one of those songs that I, as it was coming out and as the words were flowing through me, I don't think I even realized what it really was about until the song was done. And I couldn't make it pretty if I tried. It was an emotional process, and I remember in the studio that we recorded in, this was in Eagle Rock with the three producers that I worked a lot with on this record, Brendan Benson, Jordan Blackman, and John Graber. We went in, and the idea was to just go in and get a scratch vocal take off a mic that was fashioned out of an old telephone receiver. So this belongs to Jordan, who played for 10 years in Toro Yuma, a guest that you guys also
we did have
featured.
Toro on, yes,
and so Jordan is a real synth wizard, and he just loves kooky things, and and so he showed up one day with this telephone receiver mic that was $5, and we plugged it in, and we did it all in a rush because we were like, okay, let's go get coffee, we're all under caffeinated, let's just do this like 10 minutes and then we're going to be out. And so I went in there and started playing the song, and I just sang that scratch take, and I had just written Pink Gel that morning on a walk. The words were just coming out, and as I was singing, I don't know, I remember vividly being snapped into this state of intense concentration, and it calls to mind this quote that I've heard: unmixed attention is prayer. And I love that.
It took me a second, I had to really think about it.
Right. And so that was what it felt like. I was so zeroed in, even though I didn't necessarily try to be or need to be, and it took me over. I started crying a little bit in the booth, and when I walked out, I saw that everyone else was crying, and I was like, well, I guess that's the take, I don't care that it could have been more perfect, and all my desire for excellence, for perfectionism, for all that just went out the window. I was like, this is what it is, and we have to encapsulate that.
I feel like sometimes with certain recordings, certain songs, however, that, and again, apologies for the cliches, that there is some certain perfections in the imperfections, in terms of like certain crackles, certain voice breaks, and whatever it is can really add to the overall magic of that final recording. And I think that, look, personally loved Pink Gel, so thank you very much for kind of indulging me in asking about that. I know that you mentioned just then that there were 3 co-producers on this record with you. I know that you were also one of those co-producers. You co-produced the record. How did you find that process? Do you enjoy also producing music?
Yeah, it was wonderful. I've been thinking about it. I've been pretty I don't like to call myself a producer because there's so much I don't know. But the more I interact with producers that I admire, I also realize that there's a lot that everyone doesn't know. Not everyone is going to be good at everything. And I've never thought them as less of a producer, but I've been writing and releasing music for a little over 10 years now, and I've picked up so much, and I've actually always had such a hand in the production of my music. I've always played everything, and yeah, I actually love that process so much because it's, yeah, like I said, it's a medium that gives you this autonomy over the way you tell a story outside of words alone. So in that way, I guess I'm just greedy for a number of languages, you know? It's like, oh, the words aren't enough. I need to find other tools, and then I need to tell it through the visuals, and I need to tell it through my social media,
we were talking about perfection before, so is it just another part of that? Maybe.
I think so. But, you know, the lovely thing about writing a song with other people, my background is, I never went to music school. I studied history, so I was always obsessed with stories and less obsessed with the tools that one would use to tell them. And I don't think I have the best like kind of dexterity in that way. But I also have come to see it as a skill. To not know something then also limits you less sometimes if you tend to be someone who cares about doing things the right way. To not know what the right way is can be very freeing.
100%.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1000%.
Yeah, so I think I'm happy that I left that room for it. And working with these three guys, it was really fun because I've always made music on my own in my bedroom, and it's always been such a personal, cathartic process, songwriting. But being with three dudes who are in punk bands it was really fun. They made me lighten up and loosen up a lot. And I think for the first time, I got to really see how music making doesn't have to be this whole intense, this intense. I mean, it is intense all the time, but, a lot of the time, but it doesn't always have to be so high pressure. And sometimes you can just go in and leave without a song, and that's going to be fine. And, so many lines between the personal and professional get blurred. We are hanging out with each other's families, and there's such an intimacy that comes from allowing someone into your subconscious mind and all the things that you're teasing out. Like, these are things that I wouldn't necessarily have told my closest friends. And yeah, there's a closeness there that's just pretty marvelous to experience. And so it was really great.
I love that. I think it's like you can tell that there is a certain almost like an audible kind of warmth to this record.
That gave me goosebumps.
That you can tell that like obviously the people involved and invested in making it together are doing that. They're working as one. Yeah,
there was a moment I remember when we were recording that I looked at everyone going deep into their little task. So John is typically the one who flies the session. He has a great ear for dynamics, and it's a very short attention span. So he's like, we need a peak now. Like there needs to be an up and a down. That's what I think is his greatest skill. And Jordan's all about textures. Brandon's all about the little subtleties. And so everyone's always kind of doing their own thing on their instrument as we're working on a song, and then we'll put things together. And I remember looking one day at everyone working and realizing that I was the most useless person in that room at that moment. The song had already been written, and I was just staring at everyone thinking, oh, I guess I should be the one to go out and get lunch for everyone.
Anyone want coffee?
So I was like, okay, I'll go and take everyone's orders. And I was so surprised at that because I'm usually such a control freak, because to me it's like, oh, this is my experience and I want to communicate it in the most accurate way possible. So I need to, have a handle on how everything's expressed. But then I saw how much the music meant to these three people who had no part in this experience that the song had originally come from. And it blew my mind, honestly, that anyone could have that kind of dedication and love and respect for the music, despite not having gone through that same thing. And then the music began to take on another, whole new meaning for me. It began not to be just about its provenance, but more about, the process of making it and how maybe that's what I want to capture. Maybe half of that story is being told in how the music's being made. And I'm so glad to hear that, the warmth came through.
It definitely did. So I'm so just super glad to hear this record and to be able to chat to you about it, because it is a very special record, I feel, and one that I think that a lot of people should get across this year. Wondering whether I had a quick look, and full disclosure to anyone who's listening that we're chatting, I want to say it's around the middle of May. There's no current tour dates on any website that I could find, but curious as to whether we might see any shows in support of the record at any point.
I would love to. Honestly, I have never been on a US tour in my life. I've only ever played one-off shows, sometimes in Australia, sometimes in Singapore, in Europe, but I've never gone on a US tour, and that's something that I feel, to complete this whole quintessential experience of being in a band with 3 punk guys, I need to get on the road. So that's what I'm really looking forward to doing.
I think that's a fantastic idea. Hopefully we can put that into the universe and make that happen. Yeah. I'd also love that you would not tell that it was 3 punk guys that had anything to do with this record. I think also it was the apologies, my memory is shot and this is not on my notes. I think the person who mixed the record also previously had mixed a lot of NoFX and other bands as well.
Yes, so that's John Graver, who's the main producer. So he played in NoFX before they disbanded. I think they disbanded. I'm not sure. It always seems to be something new each week about NoFX. So yes, and it's wild for me to see what lives they lead outside of the studio where we make all these things in. And how different it is, they'll go play these crazy shows and play music that I really don't have a handle on, or I don't understand punk. I don't get it. I don't know. It's just not being American. It's not part of my,
which is fair as well though. Punk, I feel like is a very, I wouldn't say that I fit into that scene either. It's its own scene. It's very protective of its own scene.
People are so passionate about it.
Exactly. It's a very loving scene. Once you're in there, they take you in as one of your own, which I think is a lovely thing. It's a community, which is really cool. In terms then of, so again, hopefully we're going to see a US tour because we are here from Australia. I feel like I kind of have to ask the question, maybe an Australian tour. If
I would love that.
Just putting it out into the universe.
We did play Big Sound a couple of years ago, and I love Melbourne. I love Sydney. I can't wait to be back. It's been a long time.
Okay, beautiful. We'll wrap up our conversation in a minute, but we'll go and speak to those Big Sound people, seeing if we can try, fingers crossed, trying to get you back. We would usually end our conversation, Lynn, talking to our guests about what they're currently listening to. For yourself, is there anything that's on high rotation?
Yeah, that Bon Iver record, the one that just came out.
Yeah.
Isn't it great? I mean, I think it's his least thought out and most relaxed, most pop, most listenable, accessible record, and that's why I love it so much.
100% agree.
Right?
I think there seems to be a carelessness to it.
Yes.
It is just this is just what I'm feeling, and we'll just run with it. And if it clicks with you, it does. And if it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And it seems that it just does with people.
It does for me, and I'm so grateful that he exists. That album is so fun. I haven't been able to listen to much else. Yeah.
I absolutely love that. Thank you very much for coming to chat with us.
Thank you, Simon.
The brand new album from Linying is called Swim Swim. It's out now. We'll make sure it's in the podcast show notes for people to buy. Follow you on socials, all that fun stuff. But Lynn, thank you again for coming to chat with us.
Thank you for having me. This is so fun.